bit weird.
Very welcome and thank you for coming tonight to the full council meeting. Straight in, 21152, apologies for absence. I think we've got some from Jerry, Rebecca and Paul, and obviously Emma can't be with us tonight, and our thoughts are with her and
Yes.
all as well at home. And are we okay to accept those apologies?
Yes.
Marvellous, thank you very much indeed. Declarations of interest, any pecuniary or otherwise from anyone?
No.
Marvellous, thank you very much. Minutes of the previous meeting, I have them here to approve and sign. I wasn't even at the meeting because I was all coding and watching a bit of it. Anything that anyone would like to raise before I sign? I suppose I have. Yeah. That's why I wasn't here. Anything to raise or any issues at all? Can someone suggest I sign it, please? Thank you very much, Val. Can someone second it? Paul, thank you very much. All in favour? Thank you very much. Public participation. Nothing at all, I don't think, at the moment. Lovely. Consideration of requests from interested parties. Lisa, we've got nothing of interest. Lovely. 21157, North Northampton Council, received a report from our Water Council. Helen, good to see you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and good to see you all again. And nice to see you back and over your COVID.
Thank you very much.
So, firstly, just an apology. I had originally intended to make it to your annual meeting. I'm no longer able to, so that's why I made sure I could come today to speak to you, to see if there's anything, any burning questions from you, and to give you a little bit of a report. At our last meeting, I sort of talked quite a bit around Oundle issues, and you sort of suggested that you were perhaps more interested in some of the other stuff we're doing. So just, I'll quickly cover off a couple of Oundle things, and then move on, just to tell you a few of the things we've been doing at Northampton Council over the last month. So, as you know, last time I spoke to you about the Stoke Door Road planning application and also St Christopher's Drive. And I've been talking to the planning officer about getting a meeting together before, in particular, the Stoke Door Road one came to committee. I haven't heard back from Pete Bedge, the officer, for quite a while, and I'm a little bit, he's usually really quick, so I'll give him a couple of more days, but if I don't hear from him, I'll give him a ring, because it's just suddenly occurred to me that that's kind of just been trickling on, nothing's happened. So just to say that I'll pursue that, because I think it's quite important that we get a chance to sit around the table and ask some questions, and I know that some of you were at the local plan hearing. I hear that it was at times a little tetchy maybe, but I'm pleased that there was representation there, and now we have to wait and see what the examiner makes of it all. So that was sort of Oundle focused issues, but as you sort of said, you wanted to know a bit more about generally what's going on. So one of the big things that we had to deal with recently was our maintained nurseries across North Northamptonshire. We had an issue because one of them, the one in Corby, Pen Green, it was massively funded to a greater degree than our other three. That's because of historical reasons, because it sort of gave an enhanced service to the people of Corby. But it had got to the point where if we carried on funding that one, we wouldn't have been able to fund any of the others at all. So we had a really difficult decision to make, because we didn't want Pen Green to suffer, but at the same time we needed to make sure that we were able to fund properly our other three, that two are in Wellingborough and one in Kettering, and then possibly develop others in the future. So we based our decision partly on participation hours to start to bring the numbers more in line across the whole of North Northamptonshire. But then we also gave the nurseries a one-off grant for this year to allow them to prepare for going to full participation hours basis funding. So that was quite a difficult meeting. It was a meeting to discuss one thing. We had 55 public speakers come to that meeting. It was really emotional. We had people coming and telling us how much they depended on each of these different nurseries. So that was quite hard. We got a lot of lobbying leading up to it, and but the decision's been made. I think all four maintained nurseries are now on a strong footing, and they know what the basis next year is going to be, so they can prepare for that. So that was that, and that's something that has been going on for years, and nobody's kind of dealt with it. So we knew it was kind of coming to crunch point. So that was that one. We've recently appointed a new director of children's services, Anne-Marie Dodds. So she's joined our team. She was one of the assistant directors, and she's absolutely excellent. So I think we've got somebody really good there to help us direct children's services. And those of you who know, it's a little bit difficult with children's services because we have a children's trust, which is, we're responsible for everything that happens in the children's trust, but we don't run it. So having a really strong director of children's services, I think, is very important, because we need somebody to hold the children's trust to account and to satisfy us that the children's trust is being run well, and not letting any of our children in care down. So that was that. We've recently, in the last few weeks, agreed another grant for some of our worst off families in North Northamptonshire. The pot of money we're using comes from the Department of Work and Pensions, and we wanted to continue to support them with another £500,000 to help through the cost of living crisis. So that was agreed in the last few weeks. Homes for Ukraine, I think we all know that that's a really big issue. It sits within my portfolio area, so I'm sort of very much in touch with what's going on. Do you know what? I wrote down the figures to tell you what the most recent numbers are, and then I've got sprinkled with me, typical me. But across North Northamptonshire, we have 122 people who have offered their homes up for people from Ukraine. And the numbers of matched guests, I think it was 270. Of those, only about 51 so far have got their visas, but it's a start and it's going in the right direction. By the end of this week, every single one of those homes will have had an inspection by the council. So we're really sort of cracking on with all of that. In terms of the sort of financial issues, one of the little things that we have to do, this sounds little, is each Ukrainian who arrives here, we have to give them £200 cash, just to help them to get over the first sort of week or so of being here to buy toiletries or food or whatever. But we don't actually as a council deal in cash, so there's quite a lot of work that's had to go on just to be able to do that. So it's an immense amount of work. There's DBS checks that we've got to do. We've got to arrange school places for the children. Again, the proportion of children is quite high. It's around about, I wish I'd brought the numbers with me, but as you can imagine, it's mostly mums and children coming over and grandmothers, because obviously adult men have to stay and fight. So there's a high proportion of children coming over, and so we're sorting out all the school places for them, as well as the ones for the Afghan scheme as well. So there's a huge amount going on there. And we're getting so many requests for information that we're now going to be putting out a bulletin every week that will go to all the different parish councils, it'll go to the MPs, it'll go to anybody who's posed a question, it'll go to all of us councillors. So hopefully we'll be really up and running and keeping you completely informed about the absolute latest with that scheme. Okay, so we've just brought in the old Wellingborough waste collection and street cleansing. We brought that back in-house. That was another big piece of work, as you can imagine. We've had to buy equipment and hire equipment and all sorts of things, but that's all sorted now. Highways procurement for our highways service contract should finally be determined by around about June time. We're down to the last stage of that, which again, it's been a huge piece of work that we've done concurrently with West Northamptonshire Council, but we will be having our own contract in North Northamptonshire. I'm pleased to tell you that our adult learning service in North Northamptonshire was recently Ofsted rated good. So that was very pleasing. Lots and lots of different things. The planning blueprint is going to be is up for consultation at the moment. Something that I'm sure all of you are very, very interested in. So if you want to put your pennies worth in, please do. I might leave that behind because it's got the, I'm sure you know how to do the various consultations, but it has the email on there. So anybody who wants to get involved in that, please do. I think those were sort of just a bit of a flavour of the last few weeks of things that we've been doing in North Northamptonshire to give you a bit of an idea of the myriad of different bits and bobs that go on and things that we're putting in place. So I hope that was helpful. A little whistle stop tour of the last few weeks. And I open it up to you. Questions?
I'd just like to thank you. I think it's important because we get very much into our own little world and then we don't forget, but it's nice to see the bigger picture and really helpful, I think. So can I thank you because I really appreciate that.
I wondered, Helen, how the transfer from the CCG to the ICP or ICN or whatever it is it still on for the 1st of July? Because it's going to be a big change.
Yeah, it's my understanding is that it is on track. Obviously, as within my portfolio area, I am the lead for the council side of
I thought you'd know.
Yes. So from everything I see and all the meetings I have, the bits and pieces that are required to come together so that it will work on day one are coming together. And really, a lot of that's based around that there's four strategic priorities. One is mental health, one is children and young people's care, another is ICAN, which is integrated care across Northamptonshire, and that's all more about elderly care, keeping people safe at home, getting people out of hospital fast, etc. Those types of things. And then the final one is elective care, which we as a council have a bit less to do with because we're not busy doing operations in the council, for example. And each one of these priority areas, a piece of work is being built up called a collaborative. They're being designed with a lead organisation and then a map, I suppose, of where everything fits and how the funding's going to work. And of course, instead of it just being an NHS map, it's an NHS and council map and includes our voluntary organisations and so on. So those are busy being agreed. The mental health one is the most advanced and pretty much locked down. ICAN, to be fair, actually ICAN came first, which is the integrated care one. That one's pretty much been in place for a long time anyway. I'm a little bit worried about the children and young people's one because I don't think that's anywhere near advanced enough at the moment. The elective care one's not too bad. And then obviously these are sort of the first building blocks. Nothing ever is ready from day one with everything to work. So that will get things going and then bit by bit over time, everything else will develop around that. But in terms of the clinical commissioning group becoming the integrated care board, that will happen. And in terms of us developing the integrated care partnership, which is us and the NHS in a partnership board, that will definitely happen. So yes, but there'll still be tons and tons of work to do. I hope if that makes any sense.
I'm glad it's making progress.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Ruth.
Thank you.
Hi, Rita.
Just a couple of questions. I hope they're straightforward ones. First of all, grants to voluntary organisations. Can you tell us whether the Volunteer Action Oundle are getting a grant again?
The answer must be yes, because we've just recently rolled over all of our voluntary grants for 2 years, whilst we do a piece of strategic work about how we're going to work with our voluntary and other organisations. So we've given ourselves a couple of years to work on that, because actually we want to work more closely, we want to do more with our voluntary organisations. So the answer is yes. Every grant that was that we had before have been rolled over for the next 2 years.
Thank you, because you appreciate that voluntary action now will certainly earn their call.
They're doing
If they didn't exist, they'd have to be invented.
absolutely.
Next, I take it that you had a copy of my letter to Simon Beasley of the practice, reporting back of what I was able to press, really. When I appeared at the hearing in public on the local plan. So, happily, the practice gave me 3 pages coming clean, essentially, where they stand, what they want to do, and how they're going to do it. So, I appreciate that the frontier, as between CCGs, is about to move, but I hope you can assure us that anything you and your office can do meantime to by dexterous diplomaticking and nudging to try and coax really the practice into getting on, at least with the getting the necessary NHS funding for what they call, I think, the internal reconfigurations of the existing premises, which would lead to 7 clinicians. Because if that isn't done soon, sooner or later, we'll have some real problems.
Yeah. I always, I understand why you want people helping to push this along. In terms of the practice, how they're going to move on, how they're going to get their funding, how they want to manage the service for the future, there's very, very, very little that any of us in the council can do to shape or make any difference to that. As far as my understanding is that the only area in which we actually help to facilitate money going into that is through Section 106 agreements. I don't know whether you've seen that Michael Gove is looking to change 106 agreements to something else, a levy, and I don't know how that would work, and whether it will even happen. So from the council's point of view, as you know, when a large development or a development over a certain number of houses is given permission, money it's assessed and money goes into the local health services, into schools, into roads, into whatever it's deemed as the right place and proportion for that. But the council itself has absolutely, in my understanding, we have no control at all over what the surgery then does. Within the ICS, there's a sort of a level of, well, we would like you to be providing these services and that kind of thing, but that's a different type of influence to have, it's not the same as helping, pushing them to develop the buildings, as it were. So I don't really know. I'm at a loss as to what much we can, what we can do with regards to the actual buildings. But I will work certainly with any colleagues within the NHS system to see if we can, where there's opportunities to work with the surgery and to help develop services.
Thank you. I fully appreciate the constraints. So essentially, money that's needed for reconfiguration or expansion will have to come from NHS. Since Section 106, that's tiny, and there's so many claimants for it. I fully understand the constraints, but I'm confident you'll do what you can for us.
Yeah. I think it's always important to remember that GP practice is a bit of an anomaly in the NHS system because they're actually private businesses, and that creates issues. In another life, I, as you probably know, I used to do casework for Tom Burstall MP, and it was then deemed the right thing to do to write to NHS England about issues to do with GP practices. But to be honest with you, although they are the regulatory body, I think, for GP practices, they didn't really get involved much either. So it's tricky. It's quite difficult to, I think, for the council to affect what the GP practice does.
Well, legally, of course, you always work with central government.
Ruben, sorry, can we just carry on to someone else? Jamie's got a question.
Okay, not very more.
Jamie?
Thanks. Two questions. One, if I email you or your office, can I have the data you've got about homes for Ukrainian people? And the second thing is, I've been in contact with the council of Poland. I've been in contact with the council of Poland that I emailed you about. they've got about 130 Ukrainian refugees, and they're in the process of collating information, and they're going to give me some of that information about people who potentially want to come and live here. So I emailed you about this. The thing is, I don't know who to send that information to.
So with
It
the
doesn't seem to. You put me onto. Oh, sorry.
David Watts.
That's it. Yeah. And I looked through what he sent me, but it doesn't seem to be anything directly that I can. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, and I can understand, because I think David just basically gave you information about what we can do. And of course, this is a Home Office run scheme, and we do not have anything whatsoever to do with the visas. That is 100% the Home Office. So if we get names of people from Ukraine who want to be housed in our home in our area, we have absolutely no way of getting visas for them. They have to go through the Home Office system. So they have to register with the Homes for Ukraine scheme. So if and when your contact in Poland has that information, the most important thing is to make sure that those people that want to come to the UK register for that scheme. And then in terms of, again, now this is something I'm not 100% sure about, but I think there are charitable organisations who are then helping to match people up. Because of course, not everybody knows somebody in Ukraine and says, I want so-and-so to come live with me. So then there needs to be another body who matches them up. And I'm not clear at the moment if that's the Home Office or whether that's charitable organisations like the Red Cross doing that. So I'll try to find that out for you, because the most important thing is that they're fed into the right channels, and they don't get missed. So I'll find that out for you, James.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Brilliant. Helen, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Really, really illuminating, and good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
I hope you don't mind, I'm going to leave you because I've got to
Thank you. 215801 Town Matters, receive an update from the Platinum Jubilee. That's the full size.
This will be quite quick.
You sure?
Yes.
We have to imagine it.
Oh no, I've only got one thing to say. Since you see, just to précis where we are, the big sort of additions are, we've now got in your pack, you've got a spreadsheet which gives you the sort of schedule, which is why I've done this, so you can see. And I'm hoping that we can get this a version that's prettier than this on the website. But you now have a more detailed schedule. There's still a few minor things to change, like which competitions do we give out on Saturday. But it's pretty well set up now with timings. What was I going to say? So it's now in the process of just things carrying on. You've got an overview of what's happening. There's some good news. Councillor Arnold mentioned Oats, so they're going to be there, and they volunteered to actually help with the fancy dress by dressing up. So we have finally some semi-professional people dressing up on the day, which will help at least the fancy dress to take off. I think it'll be amazing. And it's effectively going as smoothly as it can at the moment. So that's it really. We're carrying on.
Any questions from anyone? No? Brilliant. Well, thank you, David, for all your hard work and to all of your team and Paul and everyone else.
Team effort. Thank you.
21-15802, we've had an email from a company about a triathlon event taking place at the school on the 15th of May. It was mentioned today in the meeting as well. The only stuff I do know about it is that it's during the day, there's large numbers of people involved. I think over 900 people were involved, but all the partners will be on the school property, which is a big change from the netball event, and they're phased during the day. So, good luck. Any questions? It's all about local schools, etc. Getting on triathlons, year 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. Having fun doing sport, I think. So,
seems to be they're asking some of us to volunteer. Is that right?
possibly, but that's from the company. I've not heard or seen. If anyone wants to volunteer to help the triathlon, please do.
Where are they doing the swimming?
In the sports centre, I think.
Okay.
I think it's all based.
That's what they do
there.
there.
Oh,
What they do nowadays.
Well, you
Don't
know,
get all the reference.
No, I can't say
we
that.
call it out that we don't know about.
The secret. 21-15901, the mayor's report. Sorry about putting a photo on this, but it seemed a good idea for the football club. A couple of things. Thank you to Lisa and everyone else to help cover during the various illnesses we had a couple of weeks ago. And that also suggests that moving to Office 365 and moving to the digital telephone scheme is particularly important because everything can be more seamless. I went to my guilty secret is having lived here for 31 years. I haven't been to the Amber Music and Drama Festival, and then have been to the Amber Music and Drama Festival, and I hate to say that I thoroughly enjoyed it. Much to my surprise, may I say. Yeah, some talent, real talent there, absolute talent. So yeah, thank you very much to everyone who helped organise that. Some good news about Snipe Meadow and beating Snipe, which apparently is a good thing. And something we need to consider in the comms group and elsewhere over the next couple of months is our thought on how we move the social media presence of love and Dawn in a different way. But that's a different discussion for a different time. There's the Clark's report as well, which is very interesting. Some interesting stuff from the end of March, but Emma's not here, so we can't clarify. We've got to consider a request from the RBL to decorate the War Memorial for the Platinum Jubilee, but I haven't seen a document about that. Lisa, do you know anything about that?
I think it's just a request at the moment. All I've been told was they asked if we've got any spare bunting and would the council be opposed if they put any additional bunting, perhaps around the War Memorial. They were, I think, talking to Knit and Natter to see whether they would be able to do anything, you know, the bollard covers that we have with the poppies, something similar to that, but I don't believe they've got time. So I think it's fairly minimal, but it's just a request at the moment, and I presume that when they have a meeting and they've got further ideas, they'll then ask to present them to you.
Okay, fair enough.
So it's just whether anyone has any objections.
Are we putting bunting up?
Yes,
We are
Yes.
anyway.
Special.
the Union Jack bunting has arrived.
Because we've got-
Has it?
And there's also a scheme being run in some of the schools locally for
Oh, there's
Yeah.
as
like,
well,
is it 30 metres?
something like that. Yes.
So it's quite a lot of bunting.
Mm-hmm.
Can't believe the British Legion are going to do anything inappropriate with the
No.
memorial, considering how jealously, if you like, they guard it over the year. So if they feel that it's appropriate to ask for permission, I'm quite happy to give it.
There's no-
Okay, let's see what we come up
You
with.
could run it past us so- just in case it's going to clash
Yeah,
Yeah.
with something else, would be my thought.
yeah. It's an interesting grey area maybe as well, but let's see what we come up with for May perhaps. To consider a request for a resident to give a recognition award for people working in the community. It's two people in particular who I know have done an outstandingly huge amount for lots of people during the pandemic and elsewhere. A, do we have any thoughts on it? And B, what could we do?
Well, one of the nice things about the Jubilee is you realise how cheap it is to produce trophies and awards and things like that. I think we're being charged £25 for a shield. I think my view is that this is a fantastic opportunity to not just recognise these two lovely people, but to open it up so that we have a sort of recognition of good people of the town, and we do something like every quarter, if we can. I mean, it's going to be a question of finding out. This has come out of the blue. But I think as a town council, we should use this and develop it into a sort of regular thing. And we have a shield or something that we give out as recognition, and they have it as pride. And then they are getting recognition. We put a picture of them up on the website, and then we can have a gallery of of people who've done well in the town. But they get something tangible from it, which is not expensive, but they would appreciate it, and we feel they're getting recognised. That's my view. Paul?
So I think I agree with that. I think we were thinking about something called an annual community award, like a pin.
Yeah.
But I think I'll do it annually, probably this same
Yeah.
time every year, just at the end of the
So
council
the
year.
mayor's award.
So that I was thinking, by the time we get to the town meeting,
tomorrow, next week.
Hang on, by the time we get to the town meeting, we'll be able to recognise them
Yeah.
as these people will receive the community award, which is just like a pin badge, I don't know. That's my thought. I won't do it in a quarter, I'll do it.
I think you've got it on the slide, come.
David?
Well, I agree with Paul. I think an annual award, maybe tied in with the annual town meeting, is actually quite a good idea. And what I've toyed with for some time, so I'm actually quite pleased that somebody within the community has actually come forward with it, because I think it's something we can do. And it can involve a lot of people, because in the run-up to the town meeting, you could perhaps ask for nominations to come in that could then be considered within council, maybe outside of a full council meeting, but considered by the council. And I just see it as a win-win. It's a win for the community and it's probably a win for us as well.
Yeah, that sounds very fair. Did anyone disagree with that as an idea? That's a long-term plan. Do we inaugurate it next week? Or is that too soon?
Have you got the time? Have you got the energy and the time?
In next week? Right, it's not that hard. We just say,
No, if you think it's not hard, then yes, we should.
I think we could say we're going to do
Then
this.
we can make it traffic
And
and
we
stand
can
up.
make our first one next week, and then worry about the details of it. How we do.
We can give them the award and say we can work out the price later.
We can strike a letter and say thank you very much. They may not even want to come this week, so.
Brilliant.
Should we invite them next Thursday and say, please would you come, so we give you some recognition, and then start coming up with that.
That'd be fantastic.
Lovely, brilliant, thank you very much indeed. I'm sure we'll get something drafted for that as soon as possible. To receive a response to the letter sent to the Poland Town Council, Jamie, you sort of touched on this briefly, really, do you want to give us a bit more flavour?
Yeah, so I've got my little script here. First of all, I just want to say, Beata is here, but she's given me an awful lot of help, massive support. So thank you. Okay, so there are originally two approaches we were going to take in response. The first idea was for Amber Town Council to act as a go-between for families in Amber that wish to connect with families from Ukraine who have been displaced. These families would provide assistance from financial aid, equipment, or even something as basic as a letter or a birthday card, something like that. Second approach was to see what kind of support we as a council could offer here in Amber. In terms of the first approach, Beata put me in contact with Bachin, I hope I pronounced that, Bachin Town Council in northwest Poland, and I received a very positive response when I met. They're currently in the process of sending out a questionnaire, which I mentioned to Helen, to the 130 refugees to ascertain if any of them are interested in coming to this country permanently. I've said I've contacted them about that. Due to data protection laws, but this is something I discussed with Council before the meeting. Due to data protection laws in this country, we're unable to hold personal information of refugees, either those that are able to come here or those that want to begin a new life there. To try and get around this, I've come up with various ideas, one of which it was to start a charity, but actually logistical issues involved in that are enormous. I have spoken to 3 different branches of the Red Cross, thanks to a contact from Councillor Fuller, and I'm confident that we can work with Polish grants in Bachin as a nominated charity, and that would give us a legal and legitimate contact with our 2 councils, essentially. As part of the email exchange with Bachin, they raised the idea of us helping with some support of Poland or hosting one here. I spoke with Councillor Clark about how the school being involved in this, and although the practicalities mean that we're unable to host one this summer, said that we're looking into that in a future idea and potentially sending students there to help and also send camping equipment, things of that nature. So that's the first approach. In regards to the second approach, what we can do as council here, there have been a number of different ideas. Councillor Holland put me in contact with former Councillor Peter Peel, and he had the idea of having an evening of talks about Ukraine, what potential refugees would need if they came here to live. I thought this would be a great opportunity for us to do some fundraising and something practical that we can do right away. So preliminarily booked the QPH for the evening of May the 14th, but that may push that back, as an evening for Ukraine. Beata, again, suggested inviting local school choirs to perform, and I like that we're potentially having a bake sale or something like that. Also, another idea Beata had for like this here, which again is something that we as a council can do, is much like the vintage market a few years ago. What about market day, where people can bring their own unwanted goods and have something like a jumble sale with a percentage of profits going to Polish Red Cross, strictly batching. So any ideas or thoughts are appreciated. There you are.
Thank you very much indeed, Jamie, for pushing this forward and all your thoughts. David?
I think this is a perfect opportunity for a chat about this, for Oscar Radio, because Oscar's got the ability to record voices and do recordings of the town. And my view is, if we can get the head's permission, I would love to get Oscar. I think Oscar Radio would be perfect for this, and they could do radio broadcasts using the internet, so they could do live broadcasts to Poland, and then link to their radio station. They could then do the broadcast from Poland back to us, which could be played on the radio around Oundle. We've lost the FM transmitter, but people could pick it up from the internet. Also, I think we should get the 3 schools in town involved. You can do that through Oscar, again with the head permission and support from that, and using the link man. Who's the link man at Oundle? Yeah, be brilliant for that. So that's where I think Oscar could be amazingly good for us in this situation. And the kids doing it for the kids.
Good idea on the radio.
I'm aware of somebody who I know who's, as it were, given their house already.
Okay.
They're already matched up with a couple of people from Ukraine, and they've gone through the government setup. I don't see the point of replicating something that's already in place.
But
So, for instance, the house in question has already been inspected this very morning for its suitability, etc., so that it passes all the planning laws and whatever else. Because you can't just rush about.
I think it can become correct. You're not trying to replicate that.
No.
Yeah.
The idea is maybe we've got this Barchin, which looks interesting.
Fine, yeah,
And it
I'm
could be
not
something-
against it, I'm
absolutely.
just,
But
there
that
is
could
already
be
a
a
setup
way we can focus on.
working in the town.
Well, I see a way forward as being a partnership with that town. So we become a twin. And I'm amazed at how well you've done, by the way. And Ben, so thank you. Because it's like a snowball. It's like one of those snowballs that rolls and things pick up. So we've had a discussion, I was just flying ideas. So really, I see this as being an excellent start. We now have a focus, which is this town, and that's what we should be doing rather than individuals, and then working through whatever, so various media. So that's my view. I'm very happy to support it.
It was just that I was aware of a family in Winkle who have arranged to have Ukrainians there. One of the first things they said was, do we know of any other Ukrainians who have come here so that we can put these people in touch with each other?
Right.
Yeah,
And
that
to support.
That's
So,
Yeah.
perhaps I could liaise with you, Jamie. And
Excellent, definitely.
Sorry, you stole my thunder. What I was going to say is we could do a fundraiser, but as I think the council said, there's 100 odd families in this part of the world.
130.
So presumably they'll be arriving sort of early, late midsummer. Then we have a Ukrainian event, don't we, to bring everyone together.
About the 130 aren't necessarily coming here.
That's
But you know what I mean, in the locality. It'll be that kind of connectivity where we can do some quite a bit of support as well.
And sharing culture.
Well, they'll be displaced, they'll want to
I think
feel,
it'll be a sharing
you
culture.
know, they're coming out of a traumatic situation, aren't they? They need to feel welcome, but also to be with any other people that have gone through the same process. So no, all good speed.
Can I make a proposal if that's all right, that we as a group support Jamie's efforts with budget? And each month we get an update.
Yeah.
And we all work with him as we see fit to further those aims. And maybe by May we come up with something a little bit more concrete.
Yeah.
Judged on contacts we can put with school and other families and that. And with the Red Cross as our focus. Is that okay with everyone?
So what's the proposal?
Well, the proposal is that Jamie carries on with the Barshing connection. And we focus on that by May and hopefully get some concrete progress.
Second.
Second, having to vote on that?
No problem.
Thank you very much.
Is there anything you'd like to add, Beata? Or anything you think I've missed? Or?
No, you did very well.
Thank you to Beata for your input as well.
Yeah.
21-15906, rather more prosaic, the meeting schedule for next year. Any comments, queries, thoughts? We've had some queries in the past about meetings in holiday time, but I suppose they're probably
Can't be helped.
and is the format, it is what it is the format as good as possible?
No.
Well, do we need to vote on that, or is that to approve? We need to approve.
Do you have to prove it?
We've got a proposer, we've got a seconder, that's all approved it. Lovely, thank you very much. To consider a response to the tennis club for the request to pay half the legal costs to vary their lease and reactions. I didn't see all of it leading up because the meeting broke down, I was away. Anyone have views on this that was in the meeting last time, David?
I wasn't in the meeting, but this is very similar to the museum. And the way we dealt with the museum was we gave them 50% of their legal fees. So I've got no problem with that.
That's the other way round, we're asking them to pay 50%.
All right, well, that's what we
Where the
did.
lease
That's what we did with
The
the
lease
museum.
doesn't require them to in any way.
Yeah.
So I checked with Emma today, and both of our understanding is they're totally within their rights to just say no.
Well, it's because the museum is doing the same thing.
Well, it's a separate issue, separate lease, I think.
Well,
Because
we're in a
the
lease.
Volunteer actions lease requires us to pay.
Yeah.
So then my understanding was the town council then said, do we want them to pay the 50%? And I can't remember what we said, but I mean, so this is why I checked with Emma, because our leases were so different. And she said, absolutely, it just is an entirely different lease. And as with the volunteer actions and the museums are similar in that that's already been covered. Whereas this one with the tennis, it was just a request and they're at liberty to say no.
Which is what they've done.
Whereas we require the lease, and so if that's what.
Right, we can't force them. On the other hand, the only options we have is either to carry on and do it anyway at our expense, or of course not to do it. The reality is that this mess seems to have arisen because somewhere along the line, not only did we, but also the tennis club appear to have messed up. Because it ought to have been in the original lease. Somehow it didn't get put in there. Well, that's probably our fault. But then they signed it, clearly not noticing that it was wrong. And so it is really, in a sense, a joint responsibility that we've ended up in this situation. And that's why it didn't seem unreasonable to ask them to contribute, which is what I suggested we did, and to which we've now had a rebut. So yes, they're entitled to do it. Whether we go back and point out that this is as much their mistake as ours, and it seems only reasonable that both parties pay, and we ask them to reconsider, or whether we just couldn't bear it's a matter for us. But there is the option of going back and pointing that out to them.
What are our thoughts? I wasn't party to the main discussion, I'm afraid, so I'm not sure.
They're not the same thing. I can see how it might have happened, and that's because in the case of the museum and volunteer action, but some years later, they, in a way, to carry on existing, had to move with the town council to the new premises. And I suspect that's why that's happened like that. It's a sort of, come on, they were forcing us to move. Does that make sense? In order to square the circle.
To make that thing happen.
Yeah. Whereas with the tennis club and the rugby club and things, that wasn't the case ever. That could be the reason.
Is there any appetite to go back and say, let's go halves again, or is the general mood that we should just bite the bullet and move on?
I think the wording of the original letter, we don't know to what extent that was suggested in the first place, David, unless you have
I
seen
never
it.
saw it. So
No. I mean, if it just said, do you mind paying 50% without giving any sort of proper justification as you've now articulated it, then I think there's something to be said for that. But if all of that's already been covered, there's no point in writing the same letter.
Absolutely, good.
So would it be possible to
How
establish?
pressing is time? Can we leave this to May and have the
Resume it right long enough.
So I would have thought the answer is this, and I think this is hit the nail on the head. If the letter effectively says what I've just been talking about, there's no point in saying it again. If on the other hand it didn't, then I think it is worth going back and making the point, because it is very much their mistake as much as
They're being a little bit unfair, actually,
I think they are.
because, I mean, the museum had to take the bullet and they've had to fine 50%. I know it's different.
Yeah, but until we see the letter, we don't, so effectively we're pushing this thing to next meeting. And we'll request to see the letter.
That's fair enough.
Thank you very much.
No, let me just go with what David said. If
I mean, if the
if
letter,
If I check with Emma,
if
if,
Lisa can check it
yeah.
down,
and if it wasn't specific,
got
then to
any-
send that specific detail about shared
I agree.
responsibility, okay.
she's got any doubt, let me have a look at it and I'll get back to you one later.
Okay.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Do you have to agree on this, or is it just?
Just consider response, I
So
suppose.
there you go.
We're okay with that.
Not
All in
to agree.
agreement?
Yeah.
To 21-160-01, approve the bank reconciliation balance sheet and budget for March 2022. We all okay with that? Any queries or questions?
It's just numbers.
Just on this.
Oh, well.
That's what the Chancellor says.
That's why I do,
Oh, yes.
that's why I do clever. You don't have to worry about big numbers.
21-160-02, proposal for the payments, please. I'm happy to propose that they are paid. If someone wants to make a second.
So let's get it.
We're happy to accept that we make payments as per the list.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much. 21-160-03, quote for maintenance, cover the boiler in Flatton House, I presume. We have this every year, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks
Can I propose that?
thereabouts.
Yeah.
David's proposed that,
That's
I'm happy to
amazing.
second it. Any queries or questions?
Yes, could I just, Lisa, so just to find out then, because we are also in states talking about having some considerable work done on the heating system for the building. So is this going to cover whatever work is done on those boilers? Because we've talked about linking them and.
No, this is different, this is just literally for the boilers, the two boilers, that's the maintenance contract on those two boilers. So the other bits that we've got quite a lot of money to pay out for the stuff in here, they're the ones that you'd ask me at the last estates to see if we can, moving forward, once they're working, get a similar agreement. Because that one for the boilers has been invaluable with everything else that's been going on.
Yeah.
But no, it is separate at the moment.
It's not going to be affected by, not invalidated or.
No. For some reason, like I said, the separate areas of the heating system are dealt with by different companies. And we have checked that company, because I think a few years ago, somebody had asked for comparable quotes, but this company have constantly given us discount each year, or if not given us discount, they've kept the price the same. So we chose to carry on going with them. But yeah, the other elements of the heating system, we're going to look into trying to get some sort of all covering.
Yeah, I
as
just
well.
wanted to know how those
Yeah.
two things tie together.
So it's just a boiler maintenance contract.
Yeah.
Okay. David's proposed that and seconded it. Are we all happy to vote on that?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. 21-160-04, grant application for the first responders. Items seems to cover their new car they seem to need. Obviously, they do an invaluable job in town, but it's quite a large number. Any thoughts, David?
Well, I mean, it's virtually the entire grant budget in one thing.
It is.
Even if we only funded the Razor chair, assuming that they were able to source the vehicle, it's still £2,500 if we pay for the whole thing, which is a fairly sizable grant. Now, I'm all in favour of this organisation, and if it was just, in quotes, £2,500 for that chair, I'd certainly be looking at it, and if the money isn't available in this year's budget, thinking in terms of effectively funding it out of next year's budget. But it's just utterly unrealistic to fund the 10,000 for the car, and contributing a fraction of it is, I fear, probably fairly meaningless. I don't know where they're going to find that sort of money from, but I don't think they can look to us for it.
Any other queries? Is it worth us going back to them and saying we fully support everything about them and the idea, but can we get a more readily affordable sum, as it were? I don't know if it's £7,000 a year for the car, they must get some funding from East Midlands. You know, so can we match, can we help, can we do the job, can we get a breakdown somewhere, David?
Well, I just checked, 2,500 seems reasonable, but they haven't asked for that, they want anything else. I mean, 2,500 is quite a big sum, but it's something that I think is within our limits, isn't it? I'd be happy to consider the chair.
I suspect the car's probably more important.
Well, you can't have it.
No,
Yeah, it's in the car, so.
Again, can I make a proposal? I know Andrew relatively well. If I can have a chat with him between now and May, see if we can come up with a better breakdown. Is that feasible?
Even come to the meeting.
Yeah,
We
okay.
could
But if he can come down with a
discuss.
better breakdown.
I think it would help them
Yeah,
to know,
totally.
would it not help them to know what the sort of range of grant is, so that they're not going for something over the top? No, it doesn't work that way.
I mean, I think the other thing to note is their total income in the last year was 10,000. Their expenditure was 7. They appear to have £16,000 in reserves, which is 2 years' worth of expenditure. So I think some pre-discussion, and then maybe the guy coming along to the next meeting, or
I think we need
if
to.
May's a bit fraught, going on to the June one.
But I think we support the organisation.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely, most definitely.
Marvellous, thank you very much. Talking of organisations that we support, as I said earlier, I suppose I should declare you interested. A grant application for the Annual Festival of Music and Drama. This is sort of technically a sort of retrospective application, but there's good explanations about why that's happened with COVID, etc., etc. Any queries, questions?
I'm happy to support it.
We have usually supported this for many, many years. It adds value to the town. It's a relatively modest sum. I'm quite happy to propose
It was very interesting at the final concert a couple of weeks ago, seeing the choirs from Kettering, Northampton, Peterborough, etc. going around, and effectively being stuck in the town for the day and having to go and use this cafe, that restaurant.
Yeah.
You know, 20, 30 people ahead. That's
Can I
good
second,
money for the town.
can I second?
I agree, we have supported it, so it's not a grant, it's turned into an income, absolutely, because we give it every year, so, but I do support it, but my only thing is that they've got quite a lot of reserves as well. So if we're using the reserve argument that we've just used, they've got quite a lot of cash in the bank, I would say, as well, so I'm just saying, I'd support it. Yeah, but we have to be careful, grants are discretionary, if they just turn into income every year, that's not a grant almost, it's an expected flow. Which is not a bad thing, don't get me wrong, I'm not a grumpy, I love it, I love the festival and everything. that it stands for, but we have to be consistent in our arguments.
Is it okay to sort of make the grant this year and then say, but
Yeah.
So second again.
I'm going to propose here.
He's the proposer.
Oh, we've had a proposal. Seconded, are we having a vote on it? Yep. Absolutely, thank you very much indeed. To consider carrying forward the underspend for the 2021-22 budget to the next financial year for the Estates Committee use. I don't think I asked for quite such a large blank cheque as this, but my suggestion from the Estates Committee was simply that we have a large amount of work that's going to be needed to do for the walls around the churchyard. We've put in £10,000 a year for the next 4 or 5 years, based on the sum being relatively substantial. A quote's coming from a reputable company who can do it for less. And potentially, if we could find between 15 and 20,000 from last year's budget to put in this year's budget, we might be able to get all the walls done in one go, which would give economies of scale to them. And with line pointing and rubber walls, the more the weather gets in, the worse it gets. And it seems a prudent thing that if we've got, I think, 49,000 left over in the estate budget this year with car park savings and stuff, being able for the estate council group next week, they'll spend 15 or 20,000 of that on doing the walls in one hit. Seems a prudent thing to do. What do you think?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can I do another suggestion?
Absolutely.
The QVH needs a massive upgrade to its PA system. That could be another part, but we've got quotes, and I think it would make a big thing for the town.
I think that's true, but I think we need to work with partners, creative area, etc. as well, because there might be more funding as well for that as well.
Yeah.
So are you proposing putting all of that 49,000 unspent from the states into this year's budget?
I'm happy with your plan of doing it next year with the line.
Do it this year.
Oh, you're doing it now? Oh, right, okay.
Now in 22.
So the,
No, next year.
22,
this year.
I'm
This year.
happy with that. So then we can some of the money for the project next year.
Okay, so can I propose then that we transfer 20,000 of last year's estates budget, 21-22 to 22-23, with an aim of getting the churchyard walls done this
Your
year?
second,
Thank you very much. Are we having a vote on that? Thank you very much indeed. To receive an update on the move from Pension House to HSP Financial Planning. He was giving us some details today. The owner is retiring and handing her business on to HSP Planning. I have a meeting arranged with the new company on the 25th of April. So I don't think we need to do anything. We've been sent an agreement, but I think that's how to do with, I suppose, David.
I'm just curious as to why this is in the meeting. I mean, I've probably missed the boat completely. But what is this in our council meeting? Is it our pension?
I think it's the council's pension.
Oh, right, it's the pension that the council.
It's not just an update on their business.
No, I was just trying to work out. Well, no,
It's the council's pension it pays.
well, that's fair enough. I understand. That's it. No problem.
And it might have come to the finance meeting last week. I got moved on.
As I say, I don't do money.
21162, highways matters, receive a report with speed indicator device, and clearly the batteries have run out again, so we have a lot of update. Emma said they're going to try and move it to North Street. What is interesting though, if what you wanted to say, one or two things on the draft that we've had today, or not yet?
So we've had the draft transport study back, but literally this evening. So I've got a bit of time in the next couple of days, so I'll be looking at it. They've got some interesting data in there about speed and flow and particularly flow with difficulty around the town. So this is a build on from the one 10 years ago. It's not just a rehash of that. So they've got some more volume data to come from the lenses that we had. So I think me and Ian are going to, well, Ian's going to talk to them anyway tomorrow, but we'll have a review of it properly and then report back soon as it's.
But one of the headlines is that there's speeding in some areas that's relatively high.
And there's volume, there's weight traffic as well.
There's a lot of
There's clearly some inconsistencies about what's going through the town and what should be going through the town.
So we put something in next month, brilliant months come the advertiser and the police, which will tone down speeding on West Street. And there's clearly, as people have said for a while, quite a lot of speeding.
my only thing, can I My only thing is, I find it incredible that someone's doing 70 down West Street. So I'm just worried. My concern is, knowing electronic devices, what is the accuracy of that device in terms of errors? Because to me, that's a spurious error. But it could be, I'm not saying it's not true, but it seems so unreasonably high compared to what the other speeds are. Is it something that we should take as seriously as we are?
The interesting evidence from the ATMs, which are doing it for a week or more, is that it's not.
No, I mean, if they're being supplemented by that, then that means it's
So
fine.
the data is that actually there's
Somebody speeds down
around
West Street.
West Street, New Street, as well.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Of an evening, yeah.
So,
Oh, you dare.
an update on that soon. Consider an amended proposal for the new zebra crossing on St Ossides Lane. This seems to be moving one of the pollution beacons quite a long way away from the crossing itself onto a lamppost near the coffee tavern. We've sort of been asked for our views on it.
Is that where they're going to put it?
That's one suggestion. They can't put it where they'd like to put the crossing because there's holes and cellars and pipes underneath it. And I suppose if they can't put the beacon in, they can't put the pedestrian crossing in. So they've asked for our opinion on whether we would mind it being put on a lamppost, which I suppose means less street furniture, which means less obstructions.
So the actual beacon thing will be on the lamppost.
That's what they seem to suggest.
We'll see.
I'm back to the Councillor Chester, though, I'm not impressed with the cell.
You want a proper zebra crossing with lights and
Well,
everything.
there is a proper zebra crossing about 10 feet away with lights on the other side of that. So it would do all the same jobs, just not quite have the light in the same place.
Fair enough.
Yeah, fair.
Or who's the expert, so you have to rely on them.
Is it worth us going back to Sarah and saying, can we just see what the traffic transport survey says?
I think that'd be a good idea.
And we'll send her a
Yeah.
So we'll go back and say, we'll pause and consider it in as soon as possible. 21-16201, minutes of the planning committee meeting. Anything rising on that?
I wasn't actually able to be there because I was away on holiday, so
Yeah.
thank you very much to Councillor Jones who did chair it.
Yes, thank you, and it was a fine meeting. So, you know,
Building part.
that's right.
Was it particularly well checked?
Yes. Nothing untoward really. The co-op asked us about their illuminated signs on. Of course, we have policies about those things in the preservation water preservation zone, whatever we call it. And it did turn out it seems to be retrospective, although it didn't mention that in the document. They already seem to be up. So we refused those, but otherwise it was fairly straightforward, and nothing else extraordinary.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Thank you for stepping in for breach in the large shoes of Councillor. 21-16202, North Northamptonshire Strategic Plan Scope and Issues Consultation.
I almost hesitate to go here, but here we go again. The wonderful thing about things like strategic plans is that, of course, you have to keep coming up with them. And in a sense, no sooner have we got to grips with the joint core strategy, which has actually been around for over 5 years. And of course, we've got the local plan part 2 going through, which takes us to 2031. But of course, now the powers that be say, well, actually, we should be looking at 2041, and we should be looking at it across the whole new area of the community council. So let's just start again, chaps. So the consultation document, which I think is something like 51 pages, has come out. With, as you see, because I laboriously went through it, really mainly to get my head around it, some 38 questions have been posed as to, are they asking themselves the right questions in order to start preparing the plan? Now, I think the answer is almost certainly that there are other questions that maybe could and should be asked. I don't think that attempting to start it at this point is necessarily sensible. But it does seem to me that we could put it off to the next planning committee meeting. Any councillor who wanted to attend because of this could attend in addition to the normal committee, and we could simply take a look at this, and if we have any particular questions in mind, we could go back and respond. It doesn't necessarily mean to say that we need to have a view on all 38 questions. Although I think what we will want to have in mind is the fact that those 38 questions are there for a reason. That is because in due course there is going to be a consultation. We don't need to get too excited because on the face of it, the date of that consultation is June next year. But it will still be an issue for this council. There's a second options consultation at the end of this year. We see the matter go to the Secretary of State, theoretically in April 2024. I believe these dates will soon actually happen. An examination in September of 2024, a report in April of 2025, and would be adoption in September 2025, which is roughly 3.5 months away. 3.5 years away, should I say. But that would then give you a plan to 2041, albeit that inevitably it will face review well before that. And of course this slightly ties into something we were looking at before, because we also know that they launched their call for sites. These two events are not clearly unconnected. That is in due course to start developing a plan which will include new sites for development during that extended period. There are questions in there around infrastructure. They're arguably not targeted enough. I'm very conscious of the work that was done by Councillor Reichold, and which he's been talking to us about tonight, with regards specifically to medical provision. There's an argument for saying that there should be very targeted questions around the adequacy of medical facilities in an area, because you can't just keep on building and building and building and have your existing facilities falling apart at the seams because they're becoming more and more and more overstretched. Somewhere you've got to start putting the cart before the horse, it seems to me. So could I urge everybody to perhaps try and take a look at that document who's interested? We'll look at it at the next planning meeting, please if you could put it on the agenda, please. And we'll see if we want to suggest any particular additions, changes or anything else.
I'm just wondering, there's a sort of bigger picture here, isn't there? Because they're looking at the minutiae of each of the parish, and then they build up their picture. But that doesn't help the parishes because you don't know what other parishes are saying. Like we were lucky that we know what Blackpool is doing because you're on the council. But I feel this is one of the things is I just wondered how NCAL could help parish councils with this, because I've got a feeling that they'll be asking for volunteers within the NCAL board, and I'm quite happy to consider this as an opportunity for us to try and get a better chance of getting a better outcome than what we have faced so far with all the planning and the lack of infrastructure development and in Angle. And it's just, Angle can't be alone in this. And we hear lots of moans and groans across the county. And I'm just putting it to the council. I'm going to be going to NCAL on Thursday. What would you like me to say?
The short answer is it certainly can't do any harm to raise it. It does, of course, throw up the spectre of our rural coordination group again, because if there ever was a kind of an issue around which we might want to gather, it's perhaps this. Now, the reality is it isn't going to be feasible for that group to meet again and have an input at this stage. But if we start thinking now in terms of having an input for at the consultation stage, and actually start thinking about it in a coordinated way, it has to be better than Aldel putting in something, Blackburn putting in something, Ditchmarsh putting in something.
Is it also worth at an early stage just us telling our neighbours that we're going to share what we're going to send in with them, so at least we've all seen each other's work as well. So
Yeah, because we don't get to see that.
No.
So it's done at the top end, and yet we haven't had a chance to negotiate within us. I mean, I know we're not supposed to, but it does seem a bit strange that you're putting in this we want to, and then someone does a mix, like Kevin mix, and this will put together, and that comes as that. And I think there's a better way of doing it. And I think NCAP could be a way of helping support that. We'll see what they say, but I'm just keen to know, because I think this is an area that we can get right now, before it's too late.
Well, please do, and then you can feed back, and that information may be available to us at the next planning meeting.
So David, thank you for all your work. I looked at the highlight you sent through and I thought, this isn't too bad. Of course, you cut it down to manageable pieces, so thank you for your time on that. Is it worth, Lisa, asking if Emma could just ping around to all of our rural forum friends and say, we're going to be discussing this on the 3rd of May, I think, next time, and we'd like to share our thoughts with them when we send it in, if they want to do the same, just so we know what hymn sheets are available to see. Thank you very much. 21-16203, an update following the local plan part 2 examination. Ruby.
I chose a good time to go away, so Councillor Rycliffe went in my place.
Well, thank you. According to the received, the email I sent after I had appeared at the hearing in public, an interesting meeting. The inspector was obviously a very high-grade professional, handled very well. She was low-key, spoke softly, but I think she knows the subject back to front, and she was scrupulously fair, and she was making careful notes herself all the time. Complimented by Ian Keller, the programme manager or secretary, who was sitting behind us on the old podium. I began by saying that it seemed rather bizarre that planning permissions could be given before a plan had been declared as sound. That is a major issue which I think needs to be taken up at higher levels in reasonable time. I then pushed very strongly for better infrastructure, and in particular for the needs of the medical practice, on which I obtained 3 pages where they'd come clean in advance, which I reported back to you, Mr. Mayor, and you, Consultation Chapter, in full. The inspector made careful notes all the time, so much depends on what she says in her conclusions, when she declares the plan is sound, if she does that. Although, frankly, so it'll be too late, because once planning permission's been given, it's like, frankly, in rather coarse language, letting the dogs see the rabbits. The other was can gallop ahead, invite them, there's no contract, start building, and then let tenancies. So, as I tried to bring out when I was addressing questions to Helen Harrison, was that unless the practice is able to expand somewhat, even with their least option, internal configurations on the existing site, and like 7 additional clinicians, there'll come a time when the house gets filled up where you may be in real trouble. But there again, we're up against the fact that the NHS as a whole is a confederation of confederations, internal federations of independent principalities, in particular, GP-funded practice, who are jealous of what independence has got. In fact, effectively, there are elements of the private sector and the public sector. Although you mustn't forget, in fact, that it's the Secretary of State who provides the ultimate funding and operates through NHS England, as Councillor Harrison told us, and through the clinical commissioning groups. So
Absolutely.
there we are for the moment.
Thank you for your time, Rupert. Thank you for your time last Friday. There was a meeting supposedly being planned for tomorrow
Which has been
to
cancelled.
raise some of this with Councillor Smithers, but that's now been postponed to another time. So I'm not sure what that's about. David?
Only to say that clearly one thing that this process has thrown up is the complete anomaly of a council being in a position to grant planning permissions and in a sense preempt its own entire local plan strategy in that way. It cannot be right. And another thing I should have put on the agenda for the next planning committee is to come forward with some form of a resolution which will enable us to go to a member of parliament and ask him to lobby immediately for a change in the law. It's too late for this town, sadly. But if it stops something similar happening somewhere else, it will be well worth it. So we will do that. I'm very conscious of the fact that, for example, Blackthorn made its own submissions on how nonsensical that was, that you could have that happen. And of course, they had a whole raft of other problems with what was being proposed. But it is important that we continue to push on this subject.
What it is predetermination.
Yeah.
Which it's looking law, it's wrong.
It is a form of predetermination.
Yeah.
So the practice has come up with a view on what the practice needs to do, and you've circulated that too. Can we all have a look at that paper?
Actually, the practice stuff is on their website at the moment.
Right.
They're shutting for building work next week to do an internal reconfiguration. So it's on their website.
I think it's important sometimes that we don't make assumptions about the way the NHS works if we're not quite accurate about our views, because the development of primary care is not done through practices, it's done through whatever body it is. And there will be a direction of primary care that will make sure that that's optimised. So we just need to be a bit careful, I think.
Right, moving on to Estates Matters. Thank you again for your time last Friday to Rupert or Road before. To receive minutes from the Estates Committee. We've received, is there anything, Liz, do you think there's anything worth raising? I can't think of anything we can talk
Well,
about.
apart from the fact that we
Church
paid the deposit on the reindeer.
walls. I was going to keep that secret
Hello.
for Christmas. And the
Yeah,
regular now very
it's
happy.
I mean, really, yeah, we're just working through the same things as we have been for some time. Some of them are very, they're tricky, so.
Thank you very much.
And thanks.
21-16302, the skate park, an update. I'm not
I
sure.
didn't quite finish.
Oh, sorry, I apologise.
Sorry, drew breath.
Never will right.
The hub,
Yes.
unfortunately, we've only had one application, so I had a brief conversation with Emma today, and we feel that that's not really how we want to make our decision. There was somebody else who was interested in applying, and for personal reasons wasn't able to put an application in at that time. So our first port of call is going to go back to her and ask her if we extend the time, could she perhaps also apply, and then we'd at least have two people's CVs and a proper interview process. Failing that, I think we will be recommending that we re-advertise, and we'd have to probably have a meeting with the hub working group to decide how to tweak the ad or the job or whatever to make it more attractive. So I'm sorry it isn't better news on that, but I hope that you would all support not making a choice from one.
No,
I think it's
Or, you know, quite a key appointment to take it forward.
That's it.
So,
Totally pragmatic.
bit of a shame really, because it's a nice little job.
yeah,
But no, I wouldn't do just one, I'd just keep it open,
yeah.
you know, whatever.
Yeah, so when Emma's back, then she and I, I'll find out how she got on with this other lady, and we'll respond to the current respondent in the meantime.
Brilliant, thank you for pushing it and not drawing any more.
Thank you.
21-16302, an update of the plan for the new skate park. Emma's arranged for a meeting between Russ and myself on Teams tomorrow night, so I think he wants to talk to us a bit more before he goes and talks to the users, before we go any further. So I'll find out what he says and report back as soon as possible. 21-164, approve the presentation of the annual town meeting. It's on the screen, you've had all the slides. The PDF doesn't do the transitions justice. Some of them are quite fluid, some of them are quite exciting, there's all sorts of floating in and floating out, but there we are. So, Lisa, could you quickly just scroll down
I don't know how to do it, I think it's on the mouse.
Oh, is it? Is there a mouse over there?
Yeah,
It's only for you to do it.
I didn't know that.
we even give you the podium.
So, Leslie,
Thanks,
so the
Paul.
town council will just be there on the wall. Thanks very much, Rita.
Thank you,
Thanks.
so,
Bye.
thanks.
That's all that's agreed. So,
Next bit.
a little check now whether there will be any North Northamptonshire councillors there. We'll have to check and remove it. We've lost one tonight. There might be another one though.
You never know.
We'll check on that. I need to play with that because I just put the new one in. No, I didn't. No, there is a new and improved version.
Yeah.
Lisa, how do you think about us having photos rather than names? Okay, fair enough then. Let's move on. I'll take the change photos. I just want a friendly smiling
I
face.
think we should have photos.
No.
There's- you have to have GDPR.
I don't mind, I'll go with the majority.
I would like photos, but it has to be their decision.
Could you broach it, Lisa, and see if people are willing to have their photos?
Yeah, okay.
Because then people can at least see happy smiling
I
faces.
think you're right.
They can be small, so they could be anyone's photo.
I'll be on the website anyway, so.
I think so, yeah.
Everyone's already
Yeah.
got it.
Well, no, it's just, are they okay to put on the
Yeah,
photos?
I understand, yeah.
That needs to be updated as well. Paul's working on that. Apparently the year end's just gone through. That's last year's numbers. So things that we said we were going to think about last year when we were here at the ATM. And then these are just bits from the advertiser. We move out John.
I thought that was good.
Yeah.
And then these are going to ping up one at a time. Rejuvenated young people, the love handle stuff, that's going to pop up.
Heavy filtered.
I just thought these are exciting little bits coming in.
Yeah, exactly. They
Excellent.
look very bland like this. And these would come up one at a
We're
time.
doing the deal there.
So just a community grant, the fact we did the Christmas fair, we've got the speed sign, we've done Remembrance
Excellent.
Sunday and celebrated all that sort of stuff. We're pushing the markets, we're putting the signs out so people can see what stars and what they're getting for their money.
Yeah, we like those.
Yeah,
They're definitely good.
Some environmental stuff, talking about climate change, and I know Transition Hound are going to be there throwing cans of carbon at me or something or other, so there we go. The cycle thing, Snipe Meadow, tree planting. This is just the sort of tool we could use to talk about carbon, but it's too big and scary, and therefore we find a better version. But it's just to demonstrate the fact that we've thought about it. There's a slide on planning. David, do you want to speak on planning at all? Or?
I thought that said Eagles.
So I can make that look much nicer, don't worry. I just took the design,
Yeah, I did.
which is rubbish.
Yeah, I mean, it's helpful.
I don't want people to talk about it.
Shorter period, people want
Spelling
it.
mistake.
Well, no, there's quite a few.
Spelling.
It's just, there's a typo rather than spelling mistakes.
Spelling mistake.
Just raising issues that we talked about tonight, with infrastructure and stuff like that. Just say that we've been talking about it and we're pushing it as best.
Actually, is it worth, I don't know, is this the right time to mention the experts we're going to have? Because there might be some experts we don't know.
It probably would. I mean, it would be an opportunity to say it in a public
Good
forum.
idea.
Like engineers
Because
and
unfortunately, we haven't really managed to get this thing off the ground yet. planning panel. So
I think this is a good chance to resurrect it.
I think it would be an opportunity to cast the net.
I think it's, we used to put in a, sorry, Chair,
Yeah.
through you. We used to put in, how many, planning applications were considered in the year? How many we said yes to, which got approved, how many said no to, that went through anyway?
Did.
It's a bit of work though, isn't it, to trawl through the.
If I've got time, I could try and do it. Having just ploughed my way through the Gladful neighbourhood plan at some length and done a very similar exercise for that.
I'll tell you what, I'll help if you like, I'll trawl through them.
Golly,
Not too.
that's an awfully.
This has changed a little
Me
bit.
and Val will do it together.
Tony Hoyle has, I'm going to change the wording slightly, but that's his map. He wants to talk about it for a few minutes, so that's fine. Transport study, you've got a new findings, we'll put some information up, just bounce off some ideas that come out of the report today and say that they're draft and preliminary. Then we've got Councillor Fuller, getting everyone to imagine, it's very important. Flintfield Association, Paul, I think, wants to run his little video here, but we haven't had the video put through yet, so I can't do that yet. A little thing about Fletton House, taken from the other side, exciting.
It's really interesting.
It doesn't do
That's a
it.
good building.
I said again, that's not right.
Unexpected surgery.
And hopefully just mentioning the hub manager and hub plans for a couple of minutes.
That might help get some movement.
Something a little bit about estates, what we've done, what we've changed,
I like that.
the churchyard, flowers, trees, etc. And then skate park, and we might be able to adjust this based on the next couple of days. But that's a snapshot that we've put out as a possible draft. We'll say it's
Concept.
grant funding, we're talking to users, etc. Bit of a plug for cemetery wardens, if there are any. And then a chance to mention in Victoria Hall, that's a big bad mashup, but hey, it's exciting.
I like the little crafty bits.
I'm not sure why I've left the advertiser from that till a year and a half ago in, but I have. I'll take it out at some point. I think it was there to remind me to do something, I can't remember what it was.
Keep going.
And then a little plug for the walking apps that I've just been trying on the way up here, and the GPS bit doesn't work, but the tree trail is very interesting. And then we could finish running last year's video if we wanted to remind of how sunny it once was, or we could just get rid of it.
I think that'll be a good work session.
Is there anything
We
big
ran a
for
virtual meeting last week, didn't we?
Yeah.
This
that video was just launched.
We've got one, haven't we? Ukraine.
Yeah.
Just an update, you don't need long, just to tell what's going on.
Just saying we're in contact with
We're doing something.
this.
It sounds very long.
It's
Worry.
punchy,
Okay.
very punchy.
And I would like to see it end with the Platinum Jubilee,
That's all right.
rather than
I
having.
can cheer them all up at the end.
Yeah, no, quite, because it's
I'll
like
wake
the
them
biggest
up.
thing the council's done in a while.
I'll be allowed, and I'm sure we won't,
I couldn't hear what it was you were.
put the Jubilee at the end. We put the Jubilee where it is, and we publish the agenda. Are we allowed to change it
Oh, I see.
and say, well, I just say at the start, I'm going to put the Jubilee bit at the end.
You can change.
Rousing finishing.
It's things not on the agenda that you can't.
Yeah,
That's fine. So we'll just say I'll do the Jubilee.
Well,
last.
that's my idea, I mean.
I think it's a good idea.
Everyone likes it. David likes
so
it.
it finishes on high.
Exactly, that's a really positive thing.
Right, I'll make those changes. David.
Just dress, how do you want us to be?
I think dressed is a good idea.
Dress, dress.
Is it suit or is it
Please
smart?
dress.
Smart casual.
I just wanted to know. 'cause I'm
Open
going in a
it,
suit,
a jacket maybe, or
so I just
DJ
DJ a
now.
nice top and, you know.
yeah,
Nice top, the one.
nice top. The rest of it nice as well.
Yeah, go and place up a nice top.
What are you wearing on your Zoom meetings, David?
Thank you very much. Walking tour app, as I said, I can't get the GPS, but my phone's rubbish to work, so we put it in the advertiser. We'll keep plugging it. It seems a good thing to push for the summer.
It's good, I haven't messed around with it, but it's heavy on battery.
Is it?
The locator open all the time. That's the only thing I noticed.
I'm not an expert on that, but that's fine.
That's
But
a
I
good
think
feedback.
anything that's connected to stuff like that is heavy on battery.
We can, hopefully we'll put some more, I think Paul's working on some cycling ones and some driving ones, but we can add those over the next few days. 216501 employment law update, Northamptonshire Acre March bulletin, and Animal Football Club community grant, which really tells you that they've got their big parking down. It was great to go down and have a chat with everyone. It looks good, it's grown in very quickly, and the idea is that if they can keep adding to it. It provides a lot of car parking for festivals, Christmas markets. They're very keen to use it and stuff like that. So, and it's a brilliantly public place to park. So, yeah.
Does that mean the rugby club excess parking can move them?
Let's move on bit by bit. Raise that at the stage next time. Any other matters? Paul, anything?
Not for me.
David? No. Rupert?
Nothing to add.
No.
Jenny? David? Luke?
No.
Liz?
Has there been an invitation to Charlie Best to come along?
I'm not entirely sure. I've asked about invitations, but obviously things have taken it over.
I mean, actually,
Yeah, no,
I meant
I
here,
think-
but indeed, the town meeting, but
to this.
is there a reason why we always have Helen?
I don't know what their discussions have been, but I do know Charlie said to me at one point that he's had a long-standing Tuesday night engagement, so he would find it hard to come to many meetings. Whether it's a quiz night or a dance night or something much more important, I don't know. But I'm sure he will turn up. But I'll find out if he's coming on Tuesday, Thursday next week.
Yeah.
Marvellous, thank you all for your time. Over.
Thank you.
Good. Oh, I was nice.
Yeah, pleasure.